the most relaxing facts about Native American tradition. Hello there, and welcome to History to Fall Asleep. Tonight, we are moving slowly across a very large map. We are visiting forests, grasslands, deserts, coasts, lakes, and mountains. We are listening for the quiet trace of stories, skills, languages, meals, songs, homes, artworks, and community gatherings that have been carried forward across generations. But before we begin, there is one gentle truth to hold close. Native American traditions are not one tradition. They belong to many distinct nations, communities, languages, homelands, and families. A practice that is public and familiar in one place may be private, seasonal, or not practiced at all in another. So this is not a complete guide, and it is not a journey into sacred knowledge. It is a respectful collection of 100 calm, public-facing facts about living indigenous traditions in what is now the United States. Many of the ideas you will hear tonight are old. Many are also current. Native nations are not frozen in the past. They continue to create art, teach languages, care for homelands, govern communities, raise children, make music, cook food, and decide for themselves what should be shared with the wider world. There is no need to memorize anything tonight. Let each fact arrive gently, like a small firelight reflection on water. Keep what interests you. Let the rest drift on by. If you enjoy these quiet history journeys, you are welcome to like, subscribe, or leave a calm thought below. It helps other sleepy listeners find this corner of the night. For now, settle in. Let your shoulders soften. Let your breathing become slow and even. And let us begin. Fact 1. Native American traditions belong to many distinct peoples, not one single culture. The phrase Native American can sound simple, but it holds a vast number of separate histories. Across the present-day United States, there are hundreds of federally recognized tribal nations, alongside state-recognized tribes and many other indigenous communities. Their languages, laws, foodways, art forms, and relationships with the land are not interchangeable. A Haudenosaunee longhouse, a Diné weaving, an Ojibwe wild rice harvest, and a Yupik skin sewing tradition belong to different cultural worlds. The calmest way to begin is to resist the urge to blend them into one picture. Instead, imagine a night sky filled with many stars. Each has its own position, its own brightness, and its own path. Together they form a vast sky. But none loses its identity. Let that image settle for a moment. There is nothing to solve. We can simply let it rest beside the next breath. Fact 2. Native nations are living communities in the present, not only subjects of the past. It is easy for history books to speak about native peoples only in the past tense. Yet, native nations are present today in cities, rural communities, reservations, villages, and homelands across the continent. They run governments, schools, clinics, courts, businesses, museums, language programs, and cultural centers. A tradition can be old and still be active. A basket maker may learn from a grandmother and also sell work online. A language teacher may use a smartphone app alongside lessons from elders. A canoe journey may take place on ancestral waters while being organized through modern community networks. Tradition does not mean standing still. It means carrying relationships, responsibilities, and knowledge forward through changing times. And now, without rushing, we can follow the story onward. The night is wide enough to hold one more small piece of history. Fact 3. Many native traditions are strongly connected to particular places. For many indigenous communities, a river, valley, mesa, forest, or coastline is not merely scenery. It is part of a homeland shaped by family memory, work, travel, and language. Place names can carry information about animals, water, gathering sites, old trails, or events remembered by generations. This is one reason a map made from outside a community can never tell the whole story. It may show borders and roads, yet leave out the names and meanings that make a place familiar. When a person knows a landscape deeply, a bend in a river or a rise in a hill can become a sentence in a much longer story. The land holds memory, and people hold the land in memory. Keep only the shape of that thought. The details can soften at the edges as we drift to the next quiet fact. Fact 4. Oral traditions carry history across generations. In many native communities, knowledge has long been carried by spoken words. Stories can teach a child how to behave, explain a relationship with an animal or landscape, preserve family history, or remind listeners of a responsibility. Spoken tradition is not simply a substitute for writing. It is its own careful form of knowledge shaped by voice, audience, timing, and place. A story told by an elder to relatives in a familiar room may have meanings that cannot be captured by a short printed summary. Some stories are public. Others belong to certain families, ceremonies, or seasons. Respect begins with understanding that not every story is meant to be collected, copied, or repeated by strangers. There is no need to remember every word. Let the feeling of patience remain, and let the rest move gently on. Fact 5. In many communities, the way a story is told matters as much as the story itself. A story can change slightly when it moves from one speaker to another, but that does not make it careless. The rhythm of the voice, the setting, the season, and the relationship between the speaker all matter, and specific times can. Some stories are told only at specific of year. Some require permission. Some are shared for teaching, while others are simply meant to bring people together through laughter and recognition. This means that listening is an active skill. A respectful listener does not rush to extract a moral or turn every tale into a simple lesson. Instead, the listener lets the story unfold at its own pace. In that quiet attention, memory becomes something shared rather than something taken. For a moment, imagine the place growing still beneath a dark blue sky. Then we can continue, slowly and calmly. Fact 6. Language can hold these of seeing the world that do not translate neatly into English. Many native languages contain names for local plants, animals, weather patterns, kinship ties, and places that are difficult to carry over word for word into English. A single term may include an observation about movement, a relationship, or a season. Language can also guide manners of speaking, including when it is proper to use a certain form of address or tell a particular kind of story. This is why language loss is never only about vocabulary. It can mean losing access to a library of land-based memory. At the same time, language revitalization is not merely about recovering old words. It is about giving children and adults more ways to speak with one another, describe their world, and feel at home in their own heritage. Let that image settle for a moment. There is nothing to solve. We can simply let it rest beside the next breath. Fact 7. Teaching often happens through watching, helping, and doing. In many Indigenous families and communities, learning does not always begin with a formal lecture. A child may learn by sitting nearby while an aunt prepares food, by watching a grandparent mend a net, or by helping carry materials for a craft. The lesson unfolds through repeated small actions. First, perhaps, a child observes. Later, the child helps with one simple step. Over time, the hand learns how much pressure to use. The eye learns which material is ready, and the ear learns the names that belong to the task. This kind of teaching can be patient and practical. It treats knowledge as something that grows through responsibility, attention, and trust. And now, without rushing, we can follow the story onward. The night is wide enough to hold one more small piece of history. Fact 8. Many traditions connect gratitude with everyday life. Expressions of gratitude appear in many native communities, though they take different from nation to nation. They may be spoken at gatherings, offered quietly before a meal, or felt through careful behavior toward a place or another person. The important point is not that every community uses the same words. It is that gratitude can be practiced as a habit. Noting beauty. Water is noticed. Food is noticed. The work of relatives is noticed. The return of a season is noticed. In a fast world, this can seem almost radical. It asks people to pause before treating what they need as automatic. Tonight, that pause can be very simple. A breath in, a breath out, a small awareness that the day has carried us this far. Keep only the shape of that thought. The details can soften at the edges as we drift to the next quiet fact. Fact 9. Seasonal knowledge helps communities notice when the world is changing. In many homelands, the year is understood through more than a page on a calendar. The return of a bird, the opening of a flower, the movement of fish, the melting of snow, or the first frost can signal that a task is near. These observations are practical. They may guide planting, harvesting, travel, fishing, hunting, or gathering. They are also cultural because the season carries stories and expectations. A person who watches the land over many years notices small differences that outsiders may miss. The timing of a berry patch, the condition of river ice, or the health of a wetland becomes meaningful through repeated attention. This is one reason Indigenous knowledge is often described as place-based. It grows from long experience with a particular world. There is no need to remember every word. Let the feeling of patience remain, and let the rest move gently on. Fact 10. The Three Sisters Garden is a well-known example of companion planting. Among the Haudenosaunee and many other native peoples, corn, beans, and squash have been grown together in a method often called the Three Sisters. Each plant supports the others in a different way. Corn provides a tall structure for beans to climb. Beans help add nitrogen to the soil. Squash spreads along the ground, helping shade the soil and hold moisture. The result is not only a useful garden arrangement, it is also a powerful reminder that cooperation can be practical. No single plant carries the whole burden. The garden works because the plants make room for one another. In the soft darkness of night, it is easy to picture such a field as a living pattern of balance, leaves overlapping under a summer sky. For a moment, imagine the place growing still beneath a dark blue sky. Then we can continue slowly and calmly. Fact 11. Seeds can carry memory as well as food. Seeds are small, quiet things. Yet for farming communities, they can hold generations of observation. Families may remember which variety grows best in a dry year, which corn stores well, which bean has a certain color, or which squash was favored by an older relative. Saving seed can therefore be an act of planning, care, and continuity. It connects one season to the next. In many native communities today, seed-saving work is part of broader efforts to strengthen food traditions and keep old varieties alive. A seed does not preserve the past in a museum case. It waits for soil, water, weather, and human attention. Then it becomes part of the future. Let that image settle for a moment. There is nothing to solve. We can simply let it rest beside the next breath. Fact 12. Manumin, often called wild rice in English, is central to Anishinaabe life in the Great Lakes region. In the Great Lakes region, Anishinaabe communities know wild rice as manumin. It grows in shallow waters and has long been a food of deep cultural and ecological importance. Harvesting it is not simply about collecting grain. It can involve family work, knowledge of lakes and wetlands, and care for the health of the rice beds. A pair may move quietly through the plants in a canoe, using poles and light sticks in ways that allow ripe grains to fall while some seed returns to the water. The scene is gentle. Reeds brushing the side of a canoe, birds moving above a wetland, and grain tapping softly into the boat. It is a tradition shaped by water, patience, and a continuing relationship with a living plant. And now, without rushing, we can follow the story onward. The night is wide enough to hold one more small piece of history. Fact 13. Salmon traditions have connected many Pacific Northwest communities to rivers and coasts. For many indigenous nations of the Pacific Northwest, salmon are more than a source of food. They are part of long-standing relationships among rivers and people responsibilities. Musgood, Walente, Musgood. Fishing knowledge may include reading currents, understanding runs, maintaining gear, and sharing food within families. The details differ from nation to nation and from river to river. What remains clear is that salmon return creates a rhythm of anticipation and work. Their movement from sea to fresh water is one of the great seasonal patterns of the region. When people protect a river, restore habitat, or teach young people about fishing, they are often caring for more than a resource. They are caring for a relationship that has shaped community life for generations. Keep only the shape of that thought. The details can soften at the edges as we drift to the next quiet fact. Fact 14. Bison shaped many plains traditions, but no single story can speak for every plains nation. Across the Great Plains, bison once moved in immense herds and played an important role in the lives of many native nations. Bison could provide food, hides, sinew, bone, and horn, and their presence influenced travel, trade, art, and seasonal planning. But it is important not to turn this into a single image of all plains peoples. Different nations had different histories, languages, political relationships, and ways of organizing life. What can be said gently is that careful use of a large animal required skill and knowledge. Food had to be prepared and preserved. Hides had to be worked. Tools had to be made. A successful hunt was connected to family labor and shared responsibility, not only to one dramatic moment on the open grassland at Cond. There is no need to remember every word. Let the feeling of patience remain, and let the rest move gently on. Fact 15. Gathering plants requires close attention to season, place, and permission. Plant gathering is often described too simply, as if someone merely walks into the woods and takes what is there. In reality, communities with long relationships to local plants may know when a root, berry, bark, grass, or leaf is ready, which much patch should be left alone, and how much can be gathered without harming the future of the place. These lessons are not universal recipes. They belong to particular people and landscapes. Some plant knowledge is private or protected. A respectful outsider should not assume that every useful plant is available for public instruction. The larger lesson is easy to hold. Taking from the land can also mean thinking ahead, leaving enough behind, and recognizing that renewal needs care. For a moment, imagine the place growing still beneath a dark blue sky. Then we can continue, slowly and calmly. Fact 16. Cultural burning is a form of land stewardship practiced by some indigenous communities. In several regions, native communities have long used carefully planned, low-intensity fire as one tool for tending landscapes. The exact practice, purpose, and timing are local. It may support certain foods, materials, habitats, or forest conditions. It is not the same as a destructive wildfire, and it is not something to imitate without training and community authority. 1. What makes cultural burning important is the idea that land stewardship can be active, skilled, and deeply informed by observation. Fire, used at the right time and in the right way, can be part of a long relationship with a place. It reminds us that caring for a landscape is not always about leaving it untouched. Sometimes it means knowing how to help it renew. Let that image settle for a moment. There is nothing to solve. We can simply let it rest beside the next breath. Fact 17. Rivers and coastlines have long been major routes of travel. Before highways, rivers were often the easiest paths through a region. Canoes and other watercraft allowed people to move food, trade goods, messages, and families across lakes, streams, and coastal waters. The knowledge required was substantial. A traveler had to read wind, current, weather, shorelines, and the changing surface of water. Portages, where canoes and supplies were carried between waterways, were part of many travel systems. A map may show a blue line and call it a river. For people who traveled it often, that same line held landing places, dangerous, shallows, good fishing spots, relatives, stories, and seasons. Water was not empty space between settlements. It was a road filled with meaning. And now, without rushing, we can follow the story onward. The night is wide enough to hold one more small piece of history. Fact 18. Canoe traditions vary widely across native North America. A canoe is not one single design. In different regions, communities developed boats suited to local waters and materials. Birch bark canoes in the Great Lakes and Northeast were light and efficient. On the northwest coast, large dugout canoes were carved from cedar and built for ocean travel and transport. In the Arctic, kayaks and other skin boats were shaped for different conditions and uses. Each form required practical understanding of available materials, balance, repair, weather, and the body of the water itself. The beauty of a canoe is not only in its shape, it is in the knowledge behind it. A boat reflects the shoreline where it was made, the hands that built it, and the journeys it was meant to carry. Keep only the shape of that thought. The details can soften at the edges as we drift to the next quiet fact. Fact 19. Longhouses gave the Haudenosaunee their name as people of the Longhouse. The Haudenosaunee are often described as the people of the Longhouse. Their traditional longhouses were large wood and bark homes that could shelter extended families. A central passage ran through the structure with living spaces arranged along it. The longhouse also became a powerful image for political unity. The Haudenosaunee confederacy brought together nations that understood themselves as connected within one larger house. This is a useful reminder that buildings can become symbols. A home can describe how people wish to live with one another. A roof can represent shelter. A hallway can represent connection, even when the physical building is not present. The idea of the longhouse continues to carry meaning in Haudenosaunee identity and governance. There is no need to remember every word. Let the feeling of patience remain, and let the rest move gently on. Fact 20. Pueblo communities are known for architectural traditions, shaped by desert environments. Across the Southwest, Pueblo peoples developed homes and villages shaped by dry climates, local materials, and long community histories. Adobe and stone structures could help moderate heat and cold. Multi-story buildings plazas, and carefully arranged rooms created spaces for family life and community activity. It is important to remember that Pueblo communities are living peoples, not only the makers of ancient ruins. Their towns, languages, art forms, and responsibilities continue in the present. Architecture here is not just about walls. It's about how people make a life in a particular environment. Thick earthen surfaces can hold daylight and shadow in a softened way. At night, the forms of a Pueblo village can seem to rise quietly from the land itself. For a moment, imagine the place growing still beneath a dark blue sky. Then we can continue, slowly and calmly. Fact 21. Earth lodges were homes well suited to life on parts of the Great Plains. Some indigenous peoples of the plains, including the Mandan Hidatsa and Arikara, built earth lodges. These round structures used timber, earth, and grass to create homes that could offer shelter through hot summers and cold winters. Their form shows how carefully people worked with local materials. The roof and walls were not simply piled together. They reflected knowledge of weather, insulation, support, and daily household needs. Earth lodges also remind us that the plains were never only a place of constant motion. Alongside travel and hunting, there were settled villages, gardens, trade, and complex community life. A home built partly from earth can feel especially restful to imagine. It seems to gather the strength of the ground around the people inside. Let that image settle for a moment. There is nothing to solve. We can simply let it rest beside the next breath. Fact 22. Tipis were practical homes for many plains peoples, but they were not used by every native nation. The tipi is one of the most widely recognized indigenous homes in popular culture, and also one of the most often overgeneralized. Tipis were used by many plains nations because they could be taken down, moved, and raised again with relative speed. That made them well suited to communities whose seasonal movements were connected to bison, trade, family visits, and changing conditions. Their design also allowed smoke to rise and air to move through the structure. Yet, a tipi is not a universal symbol for all Native Americans. It belongs to particular histories and regions. A respectful image of native life needs room for Longby homes, Obi, earth lodges, cedar houses, Arctic shelters, modern houses, and many other forms of dwelling. And now, without rushing, we can follow the story onward. The night is wide enough to hold one more small piece of history. Fact 23. The Dine Hogan is a home with deep cultural meaning. Among the Dine, often called Navajo in English, the Hogan is more than a simple building style. It is associated with home, family, direction, and cultural principles. Because the Hogan carries meaning beyond its visible shape, it should not be treated as a decorative theme or a casual replica. What is appropriate to share publicly is that homes can hold values. A doorway, a circle of walls, or the placement of a hearth can be part of a larger way of understanding life. Like many indigenous architectural traditions, the Hogan connects practical shelter to place and relationship. It is a reminder that a house can be built from materials, but A home is built from the meanings people carry within it. Keep only the shape of that thought. The details can soften at the edges as we drift to the next quiet fact. Fact 24. Cedar has been an important material for many Northwest Coast peoples. Along the Northwest Coast, cedar has long been valued for its strength, flexibility, and resistance to weather. Different communities used cedar in homes, canoes, clothing, baskets, tools, and carvings. The work began with knowing the tree and the forest. Some materials could be gathered from bark without cutting down the whole tree, while large logs might be selected for major projects such as canoes or house posts. This is another example of how a material can become part of a whole cultural world. Cedar was not only wood. It could be shelter, travel, warmth, art, and memory. To work with it well required patience, skill, and respect for the place from which it came. There is no need to remember every word. Let the feeling of patience remain, and let the rest move gently on. Fact 25. Basket weaving is both practical and artistic. Baskets can carry food, store belongings, sift materials, serve food, or mark important family and artistic traditions. Across native North America, basket forms and materials vary widely. Some makers work with river cane, willow, cedar bark, spruce root, sweetgrass, grasses, reeds, or other local materials. A basket may begin as a useful object, but it can also become a field of pattern, color, and personal expression. The maker must prepare the material, understand how it bends, and keep steady tension as the form grows. The finished basket looks calm, but it contains many decisions made by hand. In that sense, weaving can feel like a quiet form of thinking. One strand crosses another, and a useful shape slowly appears. For a moment, imagine the place growing still beneath a dark blue sky. Then we can continue slowly and calmly. Fact 26. Cherokee basket weaving is closely connected to local materials such as river cane. Cherokee basket makers have long worked with materials including river cane, white oak, and honeysuckle. The choice of material is part of the tradition. River cane has its own texture, color, and growing places. Preparing it requires work before any weaving begins. The material must be gathered at the right time, cleaned, split, and made ready. Its natural dyes can add darker or warmer colors. In some forms of double weaving, a maker creates two layers that become one strong basket. The finished object can look effortless, yet it rests on many steps learned and earned over time. It also rests on healthy plant communities. When the cane disappears, the craft is threatened. Protecting a tradition may therefore include protecting the riverbank where its materials grow. Let that image settle for a moment. There is nothing to solve. We can simply let it rest beside the next breath. Fact 27. Pottery traditions have deep histories in many native communities. Pottery is often associated with the Southwest, where Pueblo artists are especially well known for their ceramic traditions. But pottery has also been made in many other parts of North America. Clay work asks for an understanding of local earth. A potter may gather clay, clean it, mix it with temper, shape it, smooth it, decorate it, and fire it. Every stage has its own rhythm. A pot must be strong enough to serve its purpose and balanced enough to survive heat. In the hands of skilled artists, it can also become graceful and expressive. A pot is a simple object in one sense. It holds water or food. Yet it can also carry family style, regional knowledge, and a maker's quiet attention. And now, without rushing, we can follow the story onward. The night is wide enough to hold one more small piece of history. Fact 28. Dine weaving is a living textile tradition with changing styles and deep skill. Dine weaving is known around the world for its remarkable precision, color, and design. Weavers have adapted their work through changing historical conditions, materials, markets, and artistic choices. The basic process requires patience. Warp threads are set on an upright loom. Colored weft threads are worked across them to build the design gradually. A finished textile can take weeks, months, or longer. It may be a rug, a wearing blanket, or an artistic piece made for display. The patterns are not simply decoration. They reflect regional styles, individual creativity, and family teaching. This is one reason it is better to speak of dine weaving as a living tradition rather than as an old craft from the past. It continues because people continue to make it. Keep only the shape of that thought. The details can soften at the edges as we drift to the next quiet fact. Fact 29. Quill work turned porcupine quills into detailed designs long before glass beads became widely available. Before imported glass beads became common in many regions, artists used porcupine quills to decorate clothing, bags, containers, and other objects. Quills could be softened, dyed, flattened, and sewn into carefully arranged patterns. The work required extremely steady hands and a great deal of time. In plains and woodland communities, quill work became a distinguished art form. It could create bold lines, shimmering surfaces, and meaningful designs. Later, beadwork developed in many communities alongside, and sometimes in place of quill work, but quill work did not disappear. Artists still practice and teach it today. The quiet beauty of this tradition lies partly in its material. Something small and sharp is transformed through patience into a surface of color and order. There is no need to remember every word. Let the feeling of patience remain, and let the rest move gently on. Fact 30. Beadwork has become one of the best-known forms of native art, but its styles are highly regional. Beadwork is often discussed as though it were one shared Native American style. In reality, beadwork varies greatly in technique, colors, patterns, materials, and uses. Beads may decorate clothing, bags, moccasins, cradleboards, jewelry, or contemporary artworks. Some styles use small seed beads to create dense, detailed images. Others use larger beads in different arrangements. A floral design from one region is not the same as a geometric design from another. Beadwork is also a living art. Contemporary artists use it to tell modern stories, honor relatives, experiment with new materials, and create work for galleries, as well as for community use. Each small bead must be placed deliberately, making the finished surface a record of time and focus. For a moment, imagine the place growing still beneath a dark blue sky. Then we can continue, slowly and calmly. Fact 31. Wood carving on the northwest coast can carry family, place, and artistic histories. Northwest coast carving traditions include house posts, canoes, bowls, masks, and other works made by artists from nations such as Haida, Tlingit, Tsimshian, Kwakwaka, Wak, and many others. The details of designs and the right to use particular images can be connected to families and communities. That is why these works should not be treated as generic decorations. A carved object may have a story, a lineage, or a ceremonial role that cannot be separated from its maker. At the same time, Northwest Coast art is not frozen in old forms. Contemporary carvers continue to work in wood, metal, printmaking, and other media. They bring inherited visual languages into new settings while remaining accountable. Let that image settle for a moment. Wood, wood, wood. There is nothing to solve. We can simply let it rest beside the next breath. Fact 32. Some cultural objects are public, while others should not be copied, photographed, or displayed casually. One of the most useful things to learn about native traditions is that access matters. A song, story, image, or object may be public, or it may belong to a ceremony, a family, a season, or a particular community. This is not secrecy for its own sake. It is a way of protecting meaning and responsibility. Museums, schools, and visitors sometimes make mistakes when they assume that everything visible is available for use. A respectful approach is simpler. Ask what is appropriate. Follow rules at cultural sites. Do not treat ceremonial clothing as costume. Do not assume a photograph is welcome. And understand that a tradition can be deeply important, even when it is not explained in detail to the public. And now, without rushing, we can follow the story onward. The night is wide enough to hold one more small piece of history. Fact 33. Wampum belts have been used by Haudenosaunee people as records of relationships and agreements. Wampum beads made from certain shells have been used in the Northeast in forms of communication, diplomacy, and remembrance. Among the Haudenosaunee, wampum belts can record agreements, messages, and relationships. Their meaning is carried through the people who know how to read and explain them. As Iximio, this is different from treating the belt as a decorative pattern without context. One well-known example, the 2-row wampum, is associated with an agreement between Haudenosaunee and Dutch representatives. Its parallel lines are often explained as two peoples traveling side by side, without interfering with one another's way of life. Whether held in a council setting or discussed in education, wampum reminds us that memory can be woven into material form. Keep only the shape of that thought. The details can soften at the edges as we drift to the next quiet fact. Fact 34. Treaties are part of the continuing relationship between native nations and the United States. But. Treaties are often described as old documents, but for many native nations, they remain part of a continuing political relationship with the United States. They were agreements made between governments, often involving land, peace, trade, or rights to fish, hunt, and gather. The history of treaties is painful because many were broken or ignored. Yet they also show that native nations were and are political communities with the authority to negotiate. When people speak of treaty rights today, they are not only speaking about the past. They are speaking about obligations that continue in law and in daily life. A river, a fishing season, or a piece of land can carry the weight of a promise made long ago. There is no need to remember every word. Let the feeling of patience remain, and let the rest move gently on. Fact 35. The Haudenosaunee Confederacy is one of the oldest continuing political alliances in North America. The Haudenosaunee Confederacy brought together the Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, and Seneca nations, with the Tuscarora joining later. It is often associated with the Great Law of Peace, a framework for unity, discussion, and collective decision-making. The details are best learned from Haudenosaunee voices themselves, because this is a living political and cultural tradition, not merely a historical curiosity. Still, one quiet idea is widely shared. Unity does not require everyone to become identical. Nations within a confederacy could retain their distinct identities while working together. Like the image of a long house, the Confederacy offers a way to think about shared shelter, responsibility, and the difficulty of keeping peace across differences. For a moment, imagine the place growing still beneath a dark blue sky. Then we can continue slowly and calmly. Fact 36. Councils can be places of careful listening rather than quick decisions. Different native nations have different forms of leadership and decision-making. In many communities, councils and meetings have emphasized the value of listening, speaking in turn, and considering the effect of a choice on relatives and future generations. This does not mean decisions were always easy, or that every community followed the same process. It means that governance can be more than a contest of speed. A good decision may require time, consultation, and the patience to hear people who see a problem differently. In a bedtime sense, that is a comforting thought. Not every question needs to be answered immediately. Some answers become clearer after people have sat with them, listened carefully, and allowed the shape of the issue to emerge. Let that image settle for a moment. There is nothing to solve. We can simply let it rest beside the next breath. Fact 37. Clan systems help organize relationships in some native communities. In a number of native nations, clan relationships help connect people to family responsibilities, marriage rules, leadership, and community identity. The details vary greatly. A clan system in one nation should never be assumed to work exactly like a clan system in another. In some Haudenosaunee communities, for example, clans are connected through maternal lines and play roles in social and political life. Elsewhere, clan names and responsibilities follow different patterns. What matters is the idea that identity can be relational. A person may understand themselves not only as an individual, but also through family, community, place, and obligations to others. This can make belonging feel less like a label and more like a web of care. And now, without rushing, we can follow the story onward. The night is wide enough to hold one more small piece of history. Fact 38. Kinship can extend beyond the small household. In many indigenous communities, terms for relatives and social responsibilities can reach beyond what English speakers might call the immediate family. Elders, cousins, aunts, uncles, and clan relations may all play important roles in a child's learning and support. Again, these patterns vary from community to community, and no single description fits everyone. But the general idea is gentle and familiar. Children can be raised within a wider circle of care. Knowledge may come from many adults, not only parents. Work can be shared. Stories can be repeated by different voices. In a world that often treats people as isolated units, extended kinship offers another image. Many hands helping hold a single home together. Keep only the shape of that thought. The details can soften at the edges as we drift to the next quiet fact. Fact 39. Trade routes connected native communities long before European colonization. Long before European ships arrived, indigenous peoples traded across great distances. Shell, copper, obsidian, pipestone, food, hides, and crafted goods moved along networks of rivers, trails, and coasts. Trade was not only about objects. It brought people into contact, created alliances, spread artistic ideas, and carried news. A bead or stone found far from its original source can reveal the length of a relationship between places. These roots challenge the old idea that the continent was made of isolated groups waiting to be connected. It was already connected in many ways. The connections were not always peaceful, and they were not all the same. But they formed a web of movement across a wide landscape long before modern roads. There is no need to remember every word. Let the feeling of patience remain, and let the rest move gently on. Fact 40. Hospitality and sharing often helped make travel safer. Travel in earlier centuries could be demanding. Weather changed quickly. Rivers rose. Food supplies were uncertain. In many communities, systems of kinship, trade, and hospitality helped travelers find support. The details differed by region and circumstance, and not every visitor was welcomed in the same way. Yet sharing food, shelter, news, or guidance could be a practical form of survival. A traveler carrying a message may have depended on relationships, built long before the journey began. In this way, hospitality was not only a personal virtue, it could be part of a wider network of trust. Even now, there is something calming in the old idea that a road is easier when there are people along it who know your name. For a moment, imagine the place growing still beneath a dark blue sky. Then we can continue, slowly and calmly. Fact 41. Loch Cross has deep roots in Haudenosaunee tradition. Lacrosse is often treated today as a modern sport, but it has much older roots among Indigenous peoples, especially the Haudenosaunee. Sheep. For Haudenosaunee people, the game has cultural and spiritual significance beyond competition. It is sometimes described as the creator's game. The details of its meaning belong to the communities that sustain it. What can be said publicly is that the game requires endurance, teamwork, skill, and attention. It is played with speed, but it also carries a long memory. Modern fields and leagues may look different from earlier forms, yet the game continues to connect players to a history far older than organized professional sport. A ball moving across grass can carry a story across centuries. Let that image settle for a moment. There is nothing to solve. We can simply let it rest beside the next breath. Fact 40. 2. Stickball traditions in the Southeast have their own long histories. In the Southeast, several native nations have played forms of stickball that are distinct from Haudenosaunee lacrosse. The games may use different equipment, rules, names, and community meanings. They can bring together athletic skill, social connection, and tradition. It is important not to collapse all Indigenous games into one version, each developed in a particular region and community. The larger lesson is that play can be serious in the best way. A game can teach coordination, discipline, cooperation, and respect for opponents. It can also give people a reason to gather, watch, cheer, and remember who they are together. Even a quiet night story can make room for that energy, held gently at a distance like voices drifting from a field beyond the trees. And now, without rushing, we can follow the story onward. The night is wide enough to hold one more small piece of history. Fact 43. Music and song are diverse forms of cultural expression, and not every song is public. Native music includes many different voices, instruments, rhythms, and settings. Songs may belong to ceremonies, social dances, families, work, healing, honor, or public performance. Because of this, it is important not to treat all native music as background sound. Some songs should not be recorded or repeated outside their proper context. Others are shared openly through concerts, recordings, and community events. The respectful thing is to follow the guidance of the people who make and carry the music. A public song can be enjoyed. A restricted song can be honored by leaving it where it belongs. This distinction itself is a form of listening. It recognizes that sound can be more than entertainment. It can be memory, relationship, and responsibility. Keep only the shape of that thought. The details can soften at the edges as we drift to the next quiet fact. Fact 44. Dance remains a vibrant and varied form of native cultural expression. Native dance is not one style. It includes many forms across regions and nations, each with its own music, movements, clothing, meanings, and settings. Some dances are social and open to wider audiences. Others are ceremonial and not meant for casual viewing or photography. Museums and cultural organizations increasingly explain this distinction because it helps visitors move beyond stereotypes. A dance is not simply a performance from a distant past. It can be a living practice that brings together rhythm, family, memory, and community. When watched respectfully, it can reveal how movement itself carries knowledge. A footstep, a turn, a drumbeat, and a circle of people can communicate something that ordinary explanation cannot fully contain. There is no need to remember every word. Let the feeling of patience remain, and let the rest move gently on. Fact 45. Powwows are modern, intertribal gatherings that can strengthen community and belonging. Powwows vary from place to place, but many bring together dancers, singers, families, vendors, and visitors for events that celebrate native culture and connection. They may be small local gatherings or large competitions with participants from many nations. Powwows are not all the same, and respectful visitors should learn the rules of the event. There may be times when photographs are not allowed, songs that require standing, or spaces that should be treated with care. The word powwow is sometimes used casually in everyday English, but the actual gatherings are more meaningful than a loose meeting. They are living, social spaces where people meet relatives, honor traditions, support artists, and welcome new generations into community life. For a moment, imagine the place growing still beneath a dark blue sky. Then we can continue, slowly and calmly. Fact 46. Regalia is not the same as a costume. Clothing worn for a dance, ceremony, or cultural gathering may be called regalia because it carries meaning, effort, and personal or family history. It can include beadwork, feathers, ribbons, bells, shells, cloth, and other materials, depending on the community and occasion. Calling it a costume can make it sound like something worn for entertainment or disguise. Regalia is different. It may be made over many months, repaired carefully, inherited, or connected to an honor. The respectful lesson is simple. Do not copy it for a party. Do not treat it as a generic symbol. Look at it, when invited to do so, as a form of art and identity that belongs to a real person and a living community. Let that image settle for a moment. There is nothing to solve. We can simply let it rest beside the next breath. Fact 47. Traditional clothing was shaped by climate, work, and local materials. Across North America, people made clothing suited to where they lived. In colder regions, fur, hide, and layered materials could help hold warmth. In wetter regions, plant fibers and carefully prepared skins had their own uses. In desert areas, light fabrics and shade mattered. Along coasts, materials from sea and forest could become part of clothing and tools. This variety is another reason a single image of native dress is misleading. Clothing reflected local resources, trade relationships, artistic choices, and changing historical conditions. It was practical, but never only practical. Color, decoration, and skill could make a garment a statement of beauty and belonging. A sleeve, a pair of moccasins, or a woven belt might quietly tell a story about where its wearer came from. And now, without rushing, we can follow the story onward. The night is wide enough to hold one more small piece of history. Fact 48. Moccasins are regional footwear traditions, not a single universal design. The word moccasin is often used broadly, but actual indigenous footwear varies greatly by nation and region. Some styles were soft-soled and suited to forest paths. Others had harder soles or different seams for rocky terrain, dry ground, snow, or long travel. Decoration could include beadwork, quillwork, painted designs, or plain practical surfaces. A pair of moccasins flex the ground beneath it. It is a meeting between the human foot and a particular landscape. When people learn to recognize regional styles, they begin to see how much careful knowledge can be held in an everyday object. Footwear is not glamorous in itself, yet it can contain weather, movement, art, and the memory of many journeys. Keep only the shape of that thought. The details can soften at the edges as we drift to the next quiet fact. Fact 49. Food preservation made seasonal abundance last longer. When fish, berries, meat, corn, or other foods were abundant, communities often had ways to dry, smoke, grind, store, or ferment them for later use. The methods varied by place and food. Drying racks, storage pits, woven containers, clay vessels, and other technologies helped people carry nourishment across seasons. Preservation required planning, rest. It meant thinking not only about what could be eaten today, but about winter, travel, elders, children, and unexpected weather. The skill could be quiet and repetitive. Cutting, hanging, turning, grinding, checking, and storing. It might not look dramatic, but it was essential. A full pantry or well-filled storage vessel was a form of security built one patient task at a time. There is no need to remember every word. Let the feeling of patience remain, and let the rest move gently on. Fact 50. Fishing knowledge often includes reading water as carefully as reading a road. For many native communities, fishing has involved generations of observation about water levels, fish movements, tides, currents, weather, and gear. A river can look similar from one day to the next, but an experienced fisher may notice small changes that alter everything. The same is true along coasts and lakes. Where should a net be set? When is a run beginning? Which place is safe to approach? How can a catch be shared and preserved? These are questions that join practical skill to a long relationship with water. Fishing traditions are not only about taking fish. They can also include rules, responsibilities, and care for the places that allow fish to return. For a moment, imagine the place growing still beneath a dark blue sky. Then we can continue, walk slowly and calmly. Fact 51. Hunting traditions have often included detailed knowledge of animals and habitat. In many regions, hunting required close attention to tracks, wind, weather, animal behavior, and the changing condition of the land. It also required tools, cooperation, and a careful use of what was taken. Details differ widely across nations and environments. so no single description can stand for all. Still, it is useful to remember that hunting was not simply a chase. It was part of a larger system of food, clothing, tools, teaching, and family labor. A successful hunt might lead to many different kinds of work afterward. Meat was prepared, hides were worked, bones became tools. Knowledge was shared with younger people. The animal's life was not treated as an isolated event, but as part of a relationship that carried obligations. Let that image settle for a moment. There is nothing to solve. We can simply let it rest beside the next breath. Fact 52. Desert farming shows how much food can grow through careful water knowledge. In the Southwest, indigenous farmers developed ways to work with dry climates, seasonal rain, and limited water. Different communities used different methods, including carefully chosen field locations, runoff farming, terracing, and crops adapted to local conditions. The point is not that the desert was made easy. It was not. The point is that people learned how to notice its possibilities. A small wash after rain, a sheltered slope, or a field placed to catch runoff could become part of a food system. This kind of farming is a lesson in patience. It does not demand that the land become somewhere else. It asks what can be grown here, in this climate, with this water, in this year. And now, without rushing, we can follow the story onward. The night is wide enough to hold one more small piece of history. Fact 53. Coastal communities developed knowledge suited to the sea. Hapand. Along the Atlantic, Gulf, Pacific, and Arctic coasts, native communities developed different ways of traveling, fishing, gathering, and reading the edge where land meets water. Tides, storms, shellfish beds, currents, and seasonal migrations all mattered. The sea can look smooth from shore, yet it changes quickly. Communities that worked on coastal waters needed technologies and knowledge shaped for local conditions. A boat, a net, a paddle, a fish trap, or a shoreline path could be part of a larger web of skill. Coastlines also supported trade and communication. A bay was not only a boundary, it could be a route, a pantry, a meeting place, and a source of stories carried by waves. Keep only the shape of that thought. The details can soften at the edges as we drift to the next quiet fact. Fact 54. Birch bark was a versatile material in parts of the Great Lakes and Northeast. In regions where birch trees were common, bark could be used for canoes, containers, coverings, and other useful objects. Its lightweight and water-resistant qualities made it especially valuable. Working with bark required care. The tree had to be treated in a way that did not simply waste the resource. And the material had to be shaped, sewn, sealed, or combined with wooden frames. A birch bark canoe is an elegant example. It can be light enough to carry over a portager and strong enough for travel when properly made. The material itself seems almost unlikely for a boat, which makes the finished craft feel quietly miraculous. It is an ordinary part of a tree, turned into a path across water. There is no need to remember every word. Let the feeling of patience remain, and let the rest move gently on. Fact 55. The Chumash tomol is an example of sophisticated coastal canoe making in California. The Chumash people of coastal California developed the tomol, a plank-built canoe used for travel and trade across the Santa Barbara Channel. Building and using such a craft required advanced knowledge of wood, sealing materials, balance, waves, and open water travel. The tomol is important because it challenges the old assumption that indigenous water travel was always simple or limited to sheltered waters. It also shows how a specific technology grows from a specific coastline. Islands, currents, marine resources, and trade relationships all helped give the canoe its purpose. Today, Chumash communities continue cultural revitalization connected to the tomol, showing once again that an old technology can remain part of a living relationship with sea and homeland. For a moment, imagine the place growing still beneath a dark blue sky. Then we can continue slowly and calmly. Fact 56. Northwest Coast canoe journeys continue to bring communities together. In the Pacific Northwest, contemporary canoe journeys have become important gatherings for many indigenous communities. Crews travel by canoe, visit host communities, share meals, and participate in events that strengthen ties across waters and generations. These journeys are modern in the sense that they happen now, with present-day planning and safety measures. They are also rooted in long-standing canoe traditions. A canoe crew moves through rhythm and cooperation. Paddlers must pay attention to one another, to the water, and to the person guiding the boat. The journey is not only about reaching a destination, it is about the relationships formed along the way. In that sense, the canoe becomes a moving community. Let that image settle for a moment. There is nothing to solve. We can simply let it rest beside the next breath. Fact 57. Some Alaska Native traditions are shaped by ice, sea, and extreme seasonal change. Alaska Native peoples include many distinct nations and communities, each with their own languages, homelands, and traditions. In northern and coastal regions, life has long required detailed knowledge of sea ice, weather, animals, travel, clothing, and food preservation. This knowledge is not static folklore. It can be necessary for safety. The surface of ice, the direction of wind, and the timing of seasonal change can carry vital information. It is important to avoid treating Arctic life as exotic or frozen in the past. Alaska Native communities are contemporary communities adapting to changing conditions while continuing to care for knowledge rooted in their homelands. The cold landscape is not empty. It is full of signs for people who know how to read it. And now, without rushing, we can follow the story onward. The night is wide enough to hold one more small piece of history. Fact 58. Public art can carry history without becoming a museum relic. Native artists continue to work in painting, photography, sculpture, fashion, printmaking, film, music, digital media, and many other forms. Some draw directly on older artistic traditions. Others use completely new materials or address modern questions. This matters because it makes clear that culture is not a closed room. A beadwork artist can respond to a current event. A painter can tell a family story. A filmmaker can explore city life, language, humor, grief, or political responsibility. Contemporary work does not make tradition less authentic. It shows tradition has enough strength to meet the present. Art can be a bridge between generations, but it can also be a fresh voice speaking from this very moment. Keep only the shape of that thought. The details can soften at the edges as we drift to the next quiet fact. Fact 59. Native literature includes many forms of storytelling, from old narratives to contemporary novels and poetry. Oral storytelling remains important, and so do written forms. Native authors have created novels, poems, essays, children's books, plays, and memoirs that bring many kinds of experience into public view. Some write in English. Some write in indigenous languages, or move between languages. Some draw on family stories and community memory. Others write about city life, science fiction, mystery, humor, or love. This wide range matters because native literature is sometimes unfairly expected to speak only about the distant past. In truth, native writers, like all writers, can imagine many worlds. A story can carry an old rhythm and still take place in a modern apartment, a school, a road trip, or a future not yet seen. There is no need to remember every word. Let the feeling of patience remain, and let the rest move gently on. Fact 60. The idea of food sovereignty centers a community's right to choose food that sustains its culture. Food sovereignty is a phrase used by many native communities to describe the right to shape their own food systems. It can involve growing traditional crops, restoring seed varieties, protecting fishing and hunting rights, teaching young people how to cook heritage foods, or making sure community members have access to nourishing meals. The phrase is modern, but the relationships behind it are old. Food is not only calories. It can connect people to language, land, work, family, and ceremony. When a community brings back a garden or a traditional food program, it is often doing more than changing a menu. It is rebuilding a chain of knowledge that may have been disrupted by removal, land loss, or government policies. For a moment, imagine the place growing still beneath a dark blue sky. Then we can continue, slowly and calmly. Fact 61. Community gardens can become places of teaching and renewal. A community garden may look modest, a few rows of corn, beans, squash, herbs, or flowers. Yet, it can be a place where many kinds of learning happen at once. Children learn the names of plants. Adults share recipes. Elders remember how a seed was once grown. People talk while weeding, watering, or harvesting. In native communities, gardens can sometimes support language learning, food sovereignty, and the recovery of traditional crop varieties. They also create a calm rhythm within busy modern life. A person kneels in soil, notices the weather, and returns to the same plants again and again. The garden does not rush. It teaches through repetition, season, and care. Let that image settle for a moment. There is nothing to solve. We can simply let it rest beside the next breath. Fact 62. Some native communities and habitats connected to traditional lifeways bo. When a wetland, river, forest or grassland is damaged, the loss can affect more than scenery or wildlife. It can affect foods, materials, ceremonies, place names, and opportunities for young people to learn. For this reason, many native communities work on habitat restoration, water protection, seed recovery, and land stewardship. The exact goals are local. One community may focus on wild rice beds. Another may work with salmon habitat, native grasses, river cane, or culturally important plants. These projects show that tradition can include science, planning, law, and community labor. Caring for a habitat is not only looking backward, it is a way of making sure that future generations still have something real to learn from. And now, without rushing, we can follow the story onward. The night is wide enough to hold one more small piece of history. Fact 63. Traditional ecological knowledge is living knowledge shaped by long experience. 1. The phrase traditional ecological knowledge is often used to describe observations, practices, values, and skills developed through close relationships with local environments. It should not be imagined as a box of old tips. It is living knowledge, and it changes as conditions change. It may include weather patterns, animal behavior, plant cycles, water quality, and relationships amongst species. It is often passed through practice and oral teaching. It is also owned and governed by the communities who carry it. That last point matters. Knowledge is not automatically free for anyone to collect. Respectful collaboration means listening to tribal authorities, following protocols, and recognizing that some information is not meant for public use. Keep only the shape of that thought. The details can soften at the edges as we drift to the next quiet fact. Fact 64. Place names can preserve details that ordinary maps leave out. A place name may hold a memory of a plant, a river crossing, a seasonal a historical event, or a relationship with another community. In indigenous languages, names can be long and descriptive, carrying more than a simple label. When original names disappear from public maps, part of the landscape's memory may disappear with them. Across the country, communities are working to restore and recognize indigenous place names. This can change how people see familiar mountains, lakes, and towns. A place that once seemed anonymous begins to have a deeper history. The name becomes a doorway. It reminds people that the land had stories before modern borders, and that those stories have not vanished. There is no need to remember every word. Let the feeling of patience remain, and let the rest move gently on. Fact 65. Language immersion programs help connect children with living speech. Across many native nations, teachers, families, and language workers are creating classes, camps, recordings, dictionaries, and immersion programs to strengthen indigenous languages. The methods vary. Some programs focus on young children. Some support adult learners. Some use digital tools, while others center face-to-face conversation with fluent speakers. No program can replace the loss caused by generations of suppression, but each new speaker matters. A language grows through use. It grows when people greet one another, joke, sing, pray, teach, and tell stories in it. The goal is not always perfection. It may be courage, connection, and the willingness to keep learning. A child speaking a few words with a grandparent can be part of a much larger renewal. For a moment, imagine the place growing still beneath a dark blue sky. Then we can continue, slowly and calmly. Fact 66. Cultural camps often bring learning outdoors. Many native communities organize cultural camps where young people can learn skills connected to food, crafts, language, land, and community history. The camp may involve fishing, gardening, gathering, canoeing, art, cooking, or listening to elders. The exact activities depend on the nation and the place. What these camps often share is a different kind of classroom. The lesson is not always held at a desk. It may happen beside a river, around a table, in a garden, or under a shelter while rain taps on the roof. This setting can make knowledge feel less abstract. A young person is not only told that a plant matters. They see it, touch it, learn its name, and hear why older relatives care for it. Let that image settle for a moment. There is nothing to solve. We can simply let it rest beside the next breath. Fact 67. Tribal museums and cultural centers often tell stories from native perspectives. Museums have not always treated native objects and histories respectfully. Many collections were gathered without permission or explained without the voices of the peoples, the people to whom they belonged. Tribal museums and cultural centers offer another approach. They can place community knowledge, language, family history, and contemporary art at the center. A basket is not only labeled by date and material. It can be connected to a maker, a region, a language, or a story of survival. A historic photograph can be described by descendants who know the names of people in it. A cultural center can also become a place for classes, performances, gatherings, and youth programs. In this way, the museum becomes less like a storage room and more less meeting place. And now, without rushing, we can follow the story onward. The night is wide enough to hold one more small piece of history. Fact 68. Repatriation is about returning ancestors and cultural belongings to the communities they belong to. For many years, museums and government institutions held Native American ancestors, funerary objects, sacred objects, and other cultural items that had been removed from communities. The Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, often called NAGPRA, created a process for museums and federal agencies to work with tribes and return certain items. Repatriation can be emotional and complex. It is not simply an exchange of property. It is about dignity, responsibility, and the right of native communities to care for their own relatives and cultural belongings. The word return has a quiet power. It suggests that something was separated and that healing may begin when it comes home. The work is ongoing, and it depends on respectful consultation rather than assumptions. Keep only the shape of that thought. The details can soften at the edges as we drift to the next quiet fact. Fact 69. FUT. Modern tribal governments carry both old responsibilities and present-day duties. Tribal governments are not museums of ancient politics. They are working governments with leaders, laws, programs, budgets, courts, and services. Each nation has its own structure, shaped by its history, treaty relationships, and community decisions. Some governments preserve older forms of leadership alongside modern institutions. Others have constitutions created in different historical periods. What they share is the work of serving citizens in the present. A tribal government may oversee education, health, housing, environmental protection, cultural programs, and economic development. This is one of the clearest ways to understand sovereignty. Native nations are not only cultural groups, they are political communities with the right to make decisions about their own futures. There is no need to remember every word. Let the feeling of patience remain, and let the rest move gently on. Fact 70. Sovereignty is closely connected to the ability of native nations to protect culture and community. The word sovereignty can sound formal, but at its heart, it concerns self-determination. It asks who has the authority to make decisions about language programs, schools, land, citizenship, courts, health, and cultural protection. For native nations, sovereignty has been challenged repeatedly by colonization and federal policy, yet it remains central to their political life. It is not separate from tradition. A community may need sovereignty to protect a sacred site, manage fisheries, support elders, or teach a language in school. In this sense, culture is not only about memory. It also depends on the power to make practical decisions in the present. The right to guide one's own future is a living part of continuity. For a moment, imagine the place growing still beneath a dark blue sky. Then we can continue slowly and calmly. Fact 71. The history of removal and forced assimilation makes cultural survival especially meaningful. Native communities have endured land loss, forced removal, violence, boarding schools, bans on ceremonies, and many other policies intended to weaken Indigenous identity. These histories should not be softened away. They help explain why language programs, art traditions, food projects, and repatriation matter so deeply today. At the same time, this is not only a story of loss. Native peoples continued to raise children, tell stories, make art, protect relationships, and rebuild community under difficult conditions. Survival itself became an act of continuity. A language spoken again, a dance taught again, or a basket woven again, can carry the strength of people who refused to disappear. The past was painful, but the present is not empty. It is filled with work, resilience, and renewal. Let that image settle for a moment. There is nothing to solve. We can simply let it rest beside the next breath. Fact 2. Boarding school policies harmed many native families and languages, yet communities continue language and cultural renewal. For generations, many native children in the United States were sent to boarding schools, designed to separate them from family, language, and culture. The effects were profound and continue to be felt. It is important to name that history, honestly. But it is also important to notice the work of recovery. Families and communities have created language classes, archives, healing programs, arts education, and opportunities for elders and young people to learn together. Some old recordings and documents are being returned to communities or used with permission to support revitalization. The work can be slow, may involve grief as well as hope. Yet every new connection, every remembered word, and every shared story can become part of a larger process of repair. And now, without rushing, we can follow the story onward. The night is wide enough to hold one more small piece of history. Fact 73. Native artists often use older forms to speak about present-day life. A contemporary native artist may work with beadwork, weaving, painting, photography, video, or fashion, or sculpture. The work might reference an old pattern, a family story, a treaty, a city street, or a current political question. This is not a contradiction. Cultural continuity does not require an artist to repeat the past exactly. It can mean knowing where a form comes from and choosing how it will speak now. Some artists create pieces for ceremony or community use. Others create work for galleries, public spaces, or international audiences. In every case, the art can challenge the idea that native culture belongs only to history. It belongs to living people, whose imagination reaches in every direction. Keep only the shape of that thought. The details can soften at the edges as we drift to the next quiet fact. Fact 74. Native fashion can be contemporary, innovative, and rooted in community knowledge. Fashion is just the place where tradition and modern creativity meet. Indigenous designers may use beadwork, ribbon work, weaving, patterns, or materials connected to their communities, while creating clothing that belongs fully to the present. A jacket, dress, shoe, or accessory can carry references to heritage without becoming a costume. The best work often comes with knowledge about what is appropriate to share and what should remain protected. This is why it matters to support native designers directly rather than copying designs without context. A garment can be beautiful, practical, and meaningful all at once. It can also show that cultural expression does not have to stay in a museum display. It can walk down a street, enter a workplace, or appear on a stage. There is no need to remember every word. Let the feeling of patience remain and let the rest move gently on. Fact 75. Contemporary native music includes traditional, popular, and experimental sounds. Native musicians create and perform in many genres. There are artists working with traditional music, but also rock, hip-hop, folk, classical, electronic music, country, jazz, and many other styles. Some songs include indigenous languages. Others explore modern identity, family, humor, grief, love, or protest. This range is important because it interrupts the narrow expectation that native music must sound one particular way. A musician may carry community memory, while using a guitar, a studio, a computer, or a stage microphone. The old and new do not have to compete. They can meet in the same song. The result can be a sound that is rooted, current, personal, and impossible to reduce to a stereotype. For a moment, imagine the place growing still beneath a dark blue sky. Then we can continue, slowly and calmly. Fact 76. Public celebrations can create space for relatives to reunite. Many native communities hold annual fairs, feasts, markets, festivals, and gatherings. The exact form differs widely. Some events are centered on a particular seasons, some on art, some on dance, some on food, and some on community business. Beyond the public program, these gatherings often serve a simple human purpose. Relatives see one another. Children meet cousins. Artists sell work. Elders pass on news. People remember who has been away and who has returned. In this way, celebration is not merely entertainment. It can strengthen the ordinary ties that make a community feel like home. The bright sounds of a gathering may be lively by day, but at night they remain as a warm memory of shared presence. Let that image settle for a moment. There is nothing to solve. We can simply let it rest beside the next breath. Fact 77. Humor is an important part of many native storytelling traditions. Outsiders sometimes expect Indigenous stories to be solemn all the time. But humor has always been important in many native communities. Stories can be funny, mischievous, teasing, or unexpectedly practical. Humor can teach without turning a lesson into a lecture. It can help people survive hard times, make fun of arrogance, or remind listeners that nobody is above ordinary human mistakes. The details and characters differ from nation to nation, and some stories are not for public retelling. The broad fact remains: laughter can carry wisdom. It can loosen tension, create belonging, and make memory easier to hold. Even on a quiet night, it is pleasant to remember that history is not only made of tragedy and ceremony. It is also made of people making one another laugh. And now, without rushing, we can follow the story onward. The night is wide enough to hold one more small piece of history. Fact 78. Respectful visitors learn before they photograph or participate. At a public cultural event, visitors may be welcome. But welcome does not mean every action is appropriate. Some songs, dances, meals, or spaces may have specific rules. Photography may be limited. Certain times may call for standing quietly, not walking around, or not recording. The best habit is simple. Read the event guidelines, listen to announcements, and ask politely when unsure. This is not an obstacle to learning. It is part of learning. Respect turns a visitor from someone who only consumes an experience into someone who understands that they are entering another community's space. Good manners are not complicated. They begin with attention. Keep only the shape of that thought. The details can soften at the edges as we drift to the next quiet fact. Fact 79. Not every cultural practice is meant to be explained publicly. In an age when people expect every answer to be available online, it can be difficult to accept that some knowledge is not ours to receive. Yet many native communities have clear reasons for keeping certain practices within families, ceremonies, or trusted relationships. The boundaries protect meaning, safety, and responsibility. A respectful history does not try to force every door open. It recognizes that depth can exist without public access. Sometimes the honest answer is simply that a practice is important but not available for detailed explanation. This should not make the listener feel excluded. It can be an invitation to practice humility. We can appreciate that a tradition exists without demanding that it become ours. There is no need to remember every word. Let the feeling of patience remain, and let the rest move gently on. Fact 80. Native identity is not determined by appearance or by a stereotype. Popular culture has often created narrow images of what native people are supposed to look like, wear, or do. These images are inaccurate and harmful. Native people have always had diverse appearances, lives, professions, family histories, and ways of expressing identity. Today, a native person might be a teacher, a mechanic, a scientist, an artist, a parent, a software developer, a farmer, or all of these things at different times. Identity is shaped by citizenship, family, community, and cultural relationship, not by a costume or a Hollywood image. This fact is restful because it clears away a false picture. Real people are always more interesting than stereotypes. They have ordinary days, complicated lives, humor, responsibilities, and dreams. For a moment, imagine the place growing still beneath a dark blue sky. Then we can continue slowly and calmly. Fact 81. Cultural traditions can change while remaining meaningful. A tradition is sometimes imagined as something that never changes. But living traditions do change. Materials become scarce or newly available. People move to cities. Languages shift. Artists invent. Communities recover after disruption. A tradition can adapt without losing its roots. A basket maker may use a new tool. A language class may happen over video call. A community meal may include both heritage foods and newer dishes. Change does not automatically mean loss. What matters is who guides the change, what values remain important, and whether the community recognizes the practice as its own. Like a river, culture can move and still remain connected to its source. Let that image settle for a moment. There is nothing to solve. We can simply let it rest beside the next breath. Fact 82. Young people are important keepers of tradition. It is tempting to imagine culture as something held only by elders. Elders are deeply important, but young people also carry traditions forward. They learn songs, languages, arts, sports, gardening, technology, and community responsibilities. They may bring new ideas, new energy, and new ways to reach other learners. A teenager making a video in an Indigenous language, a student helping at a cultural camp, or a young artist learning beadwork from a relative can all be part of continuity. Tradition survives through relationships between generations. It is not handed down like a sealed box. It is practiced, questioned, enjoyed, and made new by people who decide it matters. And now, without rushing, we can follow the story onward. The night is wide enough to hold one more small piece of history. Fact 83. Elders are valued as carriers of experience, but communities differ in how they define and honor elder roles. In many native communities, elders are respected for experience, memory, language, and guidance. Yet, elderhood is not a single title with the same meaning everywhere. The role can be shaped by age, service, family, knowledge, and community recognition. What matters is that older people can carry perspectives that younger generations need. They may remember a place before it changed, a word before it became rare, or a relative whose stories still guide the family. Listening to elders is not only about looking backward, it is a way of widening the present. A community that makes room for long memory can make decisions with more depth and patience. Keep only the shape of that thought. The details can soften at the edges as we drift to the next quiet fact. Fact 84. Intergenerational work often happens through ordinary tasks. A grandparent and child do not need a formal classroom to share knowledge. They may work together in a kitchen, a garden, a workshop, a canoe, a community center, or a car ride home from an event. One person peels, the other watches. One person names a plant, the other repeats the word. One person tells a story that begins with something small, such as the weather, and ends with a memory from long ago. Wet. These ordinary moments are easy to overlook because they are not dramatic. Yet, they are often where culture lives most securely. A tradition does not always arrive with a drumbeat. Sometimes it arrives in the patient way someone folds cloth, sharpens a tool, or says goodnight. There is no need to remember every word. Let the feeling of patience remain, and let the rest move gently on. Fact 85. Many native communities maintain archives to protect photographs, recordings, documents, and family histories. Archives can hold old photographs, letters, maps, recordings, newspapers, and community records. When these materials are cared for by or in partnership with native communities, they can become powerful tools for language work, family research, cultural education, and historical truth. A photograph once labeled only with a vague word, such as Indian, may be identified by descendants who know a face, a village, or a family name. An old recording may help support language revitalization when used with community permission. Archives are not neutral piles of paper. They reflect who collected, named, and kept the material. Bringing native voices into archival work helps turn records into relationships. For a moment, imagine the place growing still beneath a dark blue sky. Then we can continue, slowly and calmly. Fact 86. Some communities are restoring traditional names to people and places. Names can be reclaimed in many ways. A person may choose to learn and use a family name in an indigenous language. A school may adopt a local place name. A mountain, river, or park may officially restore a name that existed long before colonization. These changes can feel symbolic, but symbols matter. A name tells people whose memory is visible in public space. It can also help young generation yarns hear familiar sounds and meanings in places they pass every day. Restoring a name does not erase history. It makes the history more complete. The land did not begin when a later map was printed. The older names remind us of that. Let that image settle for a moment. There is nothing to solve. We can simply let it rest beside the next breath. Fact 87. Native knowledge has contributed to environmental understanding, but collaboration must be respectful. Kamsaboven. Scientists and public agencies increasingly recognize that indigenous observations can contribute to understanding forests, water, wildlife, climate, and ecosystems. This can be valuable, but it must be done with respect. Communities should not be treated as sources of free data. They should have a say in what is shared, how it is used, and what benefits return to them. Good collaboration begins with relationships, not extraction. It takes time to build trust. Understood. It listens to tribal experts and acknowledges that knowledge may include values and responsibilities as well as measurements. This approach can feel slower than simply gathering information, but slower can be wiser. It leaves room for consent, context, and care. And now, without rushing, we can follow the story onward. The night is wide enough to hold one more small piece of history. Fact 88. Caring for water is a recurring theme in many native communities. Rivers, lakes, springs, wetlands, and coastlines provide food, travel, ceremony, beauty, and life. For this reason, water protection is a major concern for many native nations. The specific issues vary. One place may face pollution. Another may face drought, dams, development, or changing fish populations. Yet the underlying relationship is often described in terms of responsibility rather than ownership alone. Water is needed by people, animals, plants, and future generations. It moves through every part of a homeland. A quiet way to hold this fact is to imagine a small stream at night. It keeps moving when no one is watching. Caring for it is an act of respect for all the lives downstream. Keep only the shape of that thought. The details can soften at the edges as we drift to the next quiet fact. Fact 89. Traditional foods are often connected to physical, cultural, and community well-being. Food carries more than flavor. A traditional dish can connect a person to language, family, harvest, ceremony, or a remembered place. For native communities, whose food systems were disrupted by removal and colonization, restoring traditional foods can be especially meaningful. It may involve growing heritage crops, harvesting local plants, teaching recipes, protecting fishing rights, or sharing meals across generations. This does not mean that every native person eats the same foods or follows the same diet. It means that food can be one pathway back to relationship. A pot on a stove, a table full of relatives, or a meal prepared for a community event can become a place where history feels close and warm. There is no need to remember every word. Let the feeling of patience remain, and let the rest move gently on. Fact 90. Sharing food can be a way of strengthening community. In many cultures, a meal is more than a meal. It creates a reason to gather, talk, welcome guests, honor elders, and make sure nobody is left out. Native communities have many different food traditions, but sharing often remains a powerful social practice. A person who brings food to a gathering contributes more than ingredients. They contribute care and presence. A meal can mark a season, a celebration, a return home, or a time of mourning. It can also be completely ordinary. People eating together after work or after a long day of community activity. The quiet fact is that food has a social memory. It tastes different when it is connected to people who know the story of how it came to the table. For a moment, imagine the place growing still beneath a dark blue sky. Then we can continue, slowly and calmly. Fact 91. Native entrepreneurship can support artists, families, and cultural continuity. Many native artists and makers support themselves through the work of their hands and imagination. They may sell baskets, beadwork, pottery, jewelry, textiles, paintings, books, music, or digital art. Buying directly from native artists can support both individual families and the wider continuation of knowledge. It also helps distinguish authentic work from mass-produced imitations that use indigenous designs without permission or benefit. An honest purchase can carry a relationship. A buyer learns the artist's name, the community connection, and the time involved in making the piece. The object then becomes more than a souvenir. It becomes a reminder that art is labor, skill, and living culture. Let that image settle for a moment. There is nothing to solve. We can simply let it rest beside the next breath. Fact 92. Native nations continue to shape the broader culture of the United States. Native influence can be found in foods, place names, environmental practices, art, sports, language, and political history. Yet, this influence is often overlooked or simplified. People may recognize a familiar word without knowing its indigenous origin or enjoy a food without understanding the community knowledge behind it. Learning more carefully can change how the familiar world appears. So, a map becomes layered with older names. A garden becomes connected to earlier agricultural knowledge. A sport becomes linked to a living nation. The goal is not to claim that everything comes from one source. It is to notice that native nations have always been part of the story, not a brief chapter before someone else arrived. And now, without rushing, we can follow the story onward. The night is wide enough to hold one more small piece of history. Fact 93. Respectful learning begins by listening to native sources. When you want to learn about a particular native nation, the best place to start is often with that nation's own official website, cultural center, museum, educators, or community-produced materials. National museums and libraries can also be useful, especially when they work in partnership with native voices. This approach helps avoid myths and stereotypes that have been repeated for generations. It also keeps the focus on living people rather than only on outside interpretations. There is something simple and fair about this. When a community is speaking about itself, listen to that community first. The same principle works in ordinary life. If you want to understand a person, do not only ask strangers what they are like. Keep only the shape of that thought. The details can soften at the edges as we drift to the next quiet fact. Fact 94. It is possible to appreciate native traditions without borrowing what does not belong to you. Appreciation is different from imitation. A person can learn about a culture, support native artists, attend public events respectfully, read books by native authors, and listen to native musicians without copying ceremonial clothing, sacred symbols, or practices. This comes down to relationship and permission. Borrowing without context can turn something meaningful into a costume or decoration. Appreciation leaves the meaning with the people to whom it belongs. It is content to learn, support, and show respect. This can feel like a small distinction, but it has real weight. It recognizes that beauty does not become public property simply because someone else finds it attractive. There is no need to remember every word. Let the feeling of patience remain, and let the rest move gently on. Fact 95. One of the most calming lessons in this history is that culture survives through relationships. A tradition does not live only in an object, a book, or a museum. It lives when people relate to one another. A person teaches a child. A cousin helps at a gathering. An artist remembers who showed them a technique. A community protects a river or a language because it matters to the people who will come after them. This is why traditions can survive even after great disruption. Objects can be lost, places can change, but relationships can create a path back. They can help people remember, rebuild, and begin again. Tonight, that may be the gentlest fact of all. Human beings carry one another forward. For a moment, imagine the place growing still beneath a dark blue sky. Then we can continue, slowly and calmly. Fact 96. Native traditions are not only about survival. They are also about joy, beauty, and ordinary life. The history of native peoples includes hardship, resistance, and loss, and those truths must be remembered. But it also includes jokes, games, recipes, friendships, songs, weddings, gardens, art, and the ordinary pleasure of being together. A history that shows only suffering is incomplete. It can make living people seem like symbols rather than whole human beings. A better picture includes work and rest, grief and laughter, ceremony and everyday chores. It includes the bright colors of a beadwork pattern, the smell of food cooking, the sound of children talking, and the quiet satisfaction of finishing a basket or planting a seed. Culture survives not only because people defend it, but because people love it. Let that image settle for a moment. There is nothing to solve. We can simply let it rest beside the next breath. Fact 97. The future of native traditions is being shaped right now. Every day, native people make choices about what to teach, what to protect, what to adapt, and what to create anew. A tradition may continue through a language teacher, a youth drum group, a community garden, a tribal court, an artist's studio, a family kitchen, or a canoe crew on the water. There is no single path. Different communities face different challenges and opportunities. What they share is the right to guide their own cultural futures. This means that the story does not end in a textbook chapter. It continues in homes, classrooms, gatherings, offices, and homelands. The future is not a blank page. It is already being written by people who know where they come from and who are deciding where to go next. And now, without rushing, we can follow the story onward. The night is wide enough to hold one more small piece of history. Fact 98. Native people have always lived in cities as well as rural homelands. Native identity is not limited to a reservation, a village, or a rural landscape. Native people live in cities across the United States and have done so for generations. Urban Native communities create cultural centers, powwows, language classes, art programs, social services, and networks of family and friendship. Moving to a city does not erase connection to a nation or homeland. It can create new forms of community. A person may travel between city and reservation, speak a heritage language at home, attend a cultural event on the weekend, and work in a modern profession during the week. The story of Native life includes movement, adaptation, and many kinds of home. Keep only the shape of that thought. The details can soften at the edges as we drift to the next quiet fact. Fact 99. Native service members have carried military service and cultural identity together. Native Americans have served in the United States military in many periods of history, even while their own nations have faced difficult relationships with the federal government. Their stories include service, sacrifice, and complicated questions of citizenship and sovereignty. Native veterans are honored in many communities through family memory, public events, and national recognition. The National Native American Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C., is one public sign of this continuing history. This fact belongs in a broader story of living Native communities. People can carry cultural identity into many roles: soldier, teacher, artist, nurse, farmer, leader, and parent. No single role contains a whole person. There is no need to remember every word. Let the feeling of patience remain, and let the rest move gently on. Fact 100. The quietest final fact is that respectful attention is itself a form of care. Tonight, we have only touched the edge of a vast field of Native American traditions. There are many nations, many languages, many stories, and many things that could not fit into one long evening. But perhaps that is all right. History does not always need to be conquered. Sometimes it can simply be approached with patience. We can notice the diversity. We can learn the names of particular peoples. We can support living communities. We can leave room for what is private. And we can understand that the past is not gone when its descendants are still here, speaking, making, teaching, and caring for one another. Let that thought rest beside you now, quiet as a river moving through the dark. For a moment, imagine the place growing still beneath a dark blue sky. Then we can continue, slowly and calmly. And now our quiet journey is complete. We have traveled through gardens, rivers, coastlines, homes, languages, artworks, gatherings, and living communities. We have remembered that Native American traditions are many, that they belong to specific peoples, and that they continue through care, creativity, and relationship. You do not have to hold all 100 facts in your mind. Let them become distant points of warm light scattered across a dark and peaceful landscape. Let the names become soft. Let the rivers grow quiet. Let the gardens rest beneath the stars. Thank you for spending this time with history to fall asleep. Sleep well. Good night.